What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we've got our Week 3 fantasy quarterback starts and sits for every single matchup. So make sure to tune in if you guys enjoy. Hit that like button, subscribe. Also, check us out on Twitter. Give us a follow there at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us throughout the week. And check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Join the free newsletter, get access to exclusive content, and also become a VIP and get personalized fantasy advice throughout the entire season from yours truly. But in the meantime, let's get right into it. Before getting into it, I want to give you guys a quick word from our sponsors at Overlay Fantasy Sports, who are taking DFS to a whole nother level. Simply put, betting on the same old Team A versus Team B money line or spread picks can get a little bit stale, a little bit boring. So why not spice things up with the all-new matchup shop function that Overlay Fantasy Sports has to offer? Basically, it allows you to bet on individual player matchups heading into the next NFL games that are coming up. And if you don't want to focus on the NFL, no worries. Overlay Fantasy has multiple options from golf to MLB to NBA. But at the end, when it comes to this betting experience, it's tough to beat Overlay Fantasy because it allows you to make simple bets, but also if you want to stack them up on one bet slip and add multiple different options for a big time parlay, you can do the same. And it's not only for one matchup here. It's not just quarterback 1 versus quarterback 2. You can look at running back matchups, tight end matchups, wide receiver matchups as well. You get the picture. There are a lot of different possibilities. So do yourself a favor. All that homework you're doing to optimize your fantasy lineups, let's have that translate into getting some extra cash in your wallet. So check out Overlay Fantasy Sports and their all-new matchup shop. We start with the Dolphins at the Jaguars, and when it comes to starting quarterbacks, here, both Ryan Fitzpatrick and Gardner Minshew are worth a start. I would rank Minshew ahead of Fitzpatrick because I like his offensive weapons a little bit more so. But even though neither Fitzpatrick or Minshew are elite players, and they probably have more inconsistent days than consistent ones, this is a game that should be relatively high scoring. Neither one of these defenses scares us all that much, and there's still some offensive playmakers here to do some damage for the Dolphins. You've got Devontae Parker, you've got Gesicki, Preston Williams will show up sooner or later, and then for the Jags, you've got someone like a Cole, like a Shark, like a James Robinson. So the pieces are there. I don't think either one of these guys is going to blow us out of the water in terms of an incredible performance, but it should be a safe, 15 to 20 points right around in that neighborhood. And there is upside here because, like we said, there is a potential for a high scoring affair in this matchup. Then we've got the 49ers at the Giants. Here we're starting Daniel Jones, and as crazy as that sounds, with Saquon Barkley out, with Sterling Shepard out, this 49ers defense has been hit incredibly hard by injuries. So much so, in fact, that now it could potentially be a matchup you want to expose. And we still like the weapons that the Giants have. They've got Slayton. They have got Golden Tate. They have got Evan Ingram. And with the trio of running backs there to take Barkley's place, one of those guys will have a decent outing. The point being is Daniel Jones should have a decent performance. Right around that 15th overall quarterback is where I would say, something in the realms of a Minshew or a Fitzpatrick outing is pretty similar here for Jones. And then as far as the sit, we're sitting Nick Mullins because right now he is expected to start for the 49ers. And if we had Garoppolo playing, then he'd probably be a low-end start. But right now, Mullins just not as experienced. So many offensive weapons injured for the 49ers. They'll probably focus on the running attack as well. So we're sitting Mullins. Then Washington at the Browns. We're sitting both these quarterbacks, plain and simple. We've said it before, Dwayne Haskins is not a good fantasy quarterback. He doesn't really have the ability to sustain multiple fantasy relevant weapons. and his upside in terms of scoring potential isn't all that high, so we're passing on him pretty much every single week. And then for the Browns, Baker Mayfield coming off a decent performance versus the Bengals, but this Washington defense is on another level. So for that reason, we're fading Baker Mayfield as well. And let's not forget that the Browns are a run-first team. From here, we've got the Bengals at the Eagles. I'm starting Joe Burrow. I like the upside here. He's got plenty of weapons in terms of pass catchers. Boyd, AJ Green. You've still got Joe Mixon, Giovanni Bernard, Sample as well. And for the Eagles, Carson Wentz, well, he's been very disappointing these first 2 weeks. Let's not pretend that that hasn't been the case, but who have the defenses that he's played been? It's been Washington and the Rams. This Bengals defense is not even close to that same territory. So we will actually start Carson Wentz this week and think he can break into the top 15 quarterbacks and in a bit of a bounce back performance so far to maybe kickstart his fantasy campaign in 2020. Then we've got the Raiders at the Patriots, and in terms of starts, Cam Newton is pretty much proving that he is an every week start. That floor is so high due to his rushing ability. He is the best runner on this offense, and he can air it out. The Raiders defense doesn't scare us all that much. So Cam Newton is a slam dunk, pretty much top 5 type of fantasy quarterback heading into this week. As far as the sits, we will sit Derek Carr. And yes, the Raiders are coming off a very impressive win over the Saints, but Derek Carr doesn't have all that many weapons, folks. It's pretty much Darren Waller as far as pass catchers are concerned, and then that's it. You know, you've got Josh Jacobs in there, and he's the rusher, and he'll take away some opportunities and take away some pressure from Carr. But other than Waller, there's nobody on this offense, too many rookies for us to have faith in Derek Carr. We think the Patriots will bounce back after their loss to Seattle, so we're sitting Derek Carr. Moving on, we've got the Bears at the Falcons, and we're starting both of these quarterbacks. Yes, we expect a bit of a smaller performance in terms of fantasy scoring from Matt Ryan because these last 2 weeks he has been in shootouts and he's had very successful outputs. But this Bears defense is on another level. So we're probably looking at between 19 to 20 points from Matt Ryan, best case scenario. So just temper your expectations there. And we've also got Mitch Trubisky as a start because the fact of the matter is this Falcons defense isn't all that scary, and it's led up big point performances from Dak and from Russell Wilson. Now, don't get us wrong, Mitch Trubisky doesn't even belong in that same conversation, but he'll have the opportunities. And like we said last week, it won't be pretty, it won't be consistent, but he has the ability to get you between 15 and 20 points on the week. Then we've got the Rams at the Bills. We're starting both of these quarterbacks. Josh Allen does have the higher ceiling, and this is his first kind of really tough matchup of the year. He took advantage of the Dolphins and the Jets the first 2 weeks. The Rams, though, their defense much better, so I wouldn't expect Josh Allen to go for over 30 points this week, and if he does, then, man, Josh Allen will be the truth in 2020. As far as Jared Goff is concerned, I'll also start him, not as high on him as Josh Allen. The Bills also have a pretty good defense. I would put Goff in that right around top 15 quarterback range. You know, group him in with those Minshews, with the Matt Ryans, somewhere in there. He's still got good weapons with Higbee, with Kupp, and with Woods, but this will be a tough outing, I think, in general. Then we've got the Texans at the Steelers. We will start Ben Roethlisberger here. Big Ben has got the weapons. Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith, James Conner, a good offensive line. You know, his performance might be dependent a little bit on game flow if the Steelers get up big and then it becomes the James Conner show. But in the meantime, we think he's got good upside, good scoring upside. The Texans defense doesn't scare us. But what might surprise you here is that we've got Deshaun Watson as a sit. And in fact, if it wasn't in week 1 for a rushing touchdown late in that game versus the Chiefs, Deshaun Watson's performances these first 2 weeks have been very lackluster. And honestly, we kind of predicted this because after the departure of DeAndre Hopkins, this offense became a little bit questionable. And you've got some wide receivers there that they've got talent, but health is an issue with them. And right now, again, we saw it with Will Fuller in week 2. Maybe Brendan Cook's a little bit limited in week 1. And the biggest factor here, however, is the defensive matchup. The Steelers, probably the best defense in the NFL. We don't like this matchup for Deshaun Watson. We would sit him. Moving on, we've got the Titans at the Vikings. We're going to start Ryan Tannehill, and he's coming off a great performance. And this Vikings secondary doesn't scare us all that much, so we do think that Tannehill can have a good performance here. I think similar to a Ben Roethlisberger, it'll depend on game flow. If Derrick Henry really gets it going, then Tannehill's upside might be limited. And speaking of quarterbacks that are kind of fluctuating, well, we've got Kirk Cousins, the biggest bust from last week, posting negative points versus the Colts, and it won't get that much easier versus the Titans. If anything, we think this will be a run-oriented game plan from the Vikings. The Titans have kind of struggled to stop the rush, so we think this will be a Dalvin Cook game. We are sitting Kirk Cousins. Next, we've got the Panthers at the Chargers, and it looks like Justin Herbert will get his second start of the year, and we're starting him here versus the Panthers. This is an absolutely awful defense. We've seen as much these first 2 weeks. And Herbert has all the weapons that he could want. Henry, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, Josh Kelly. So for that reason, we like Herbert as a potential plug and play. Now, the only thing we will say here is because the Panthers' rush defense is so god-awful, that's the only way the game flow could work against Justin Herbert. It can turn into the Austin Eckler and Josh Kelly show, but otherwise the upside is pretty good here for Justin Herbert to potentially crack into a top 15 fantasy quarterback option. And as far as the Panthers, absolutely sitting Teddy Bridgewater. This Chargers defense is a good unit, top 10 type of unit. No Christian McCaffrey. Mike Davis, okay, he's a nice backup, but he's not Christian McCaffrey. So for that reason, even with DJ Moore, even with Robbie Anderson, we're sitting Teddy Bridgewater. Next, we've got the Jets at the Colts. We're going to start Phillip Rivers. And this is a situation where, yes, Rivers has disappointed these first 2 weeks, but you look at the matchup, and similar to a Mitch Trubisky, you play the matchups here, and Rivers has weapons offensively, even without Paris Campbell. So we're going to take a chance and start him again. It won't be pretty. It'll probably be inconsistent, couple interceptions, but at the end of the day, 19 to 20 points is very realistic. And then for the Jets, we're sitting Sam Darnold. Look, the Jets right now are trending to be one of the worst teams in football. Sam Darnold does not look to be taking the next steps. And the wide receivers on this offense cannot stay healthy. Le'Veon Bell still hurt. So Sam Darnold, just by all accounts, is a fade this week. Moving on, we got the Cowboys at the Seahawks, and this is pretty easy. You're starting both Dak and Russell Wilson. I have got Russell Wilson ranked higher in terms of potential upside because the Cowboys still have Ezekiel Elliott, and he's still a big focus in terms of their offensive game plan, whereas Russell Wilson has really taken the majority of work upon his shoulders these first 2 weeks, really airing it out. An MVP favorite right now. I think this will be a very high scoring affair. Both these guys top 10 options. In fact, Russell Wilson a top 5 fantasy option this week. Then we've got the Lions at the Cardinals. We're starting Stafford. We're starting Murray. Yes, Kyler Murray is pretty much right now a no-brainer start. Another guy that's potentially an MVP favorite. He's had 2 great outings as far as fantasy is concerned. You love his upside because of his rushing ability. This Lions defense doesn't scare us. He's got top 5 upside this week. Matthew Stafford, I think probably between the 10th and 15th overall fantasy quarterback. That's what we're looking at here. Kenny Golladay returning is a big bonus for this offense. Don't sleep on that. The Cardinals defense also doesn't scare us all that much. So we like Matthew Stafford for a decent outing here. Then we've got the Bucs at the Broncos. We'll start Tom Brady. Chris Godwin is returning. You've got Mike Evans, and Leonard Fournette emerging will be beneficial for this entire offense. You've got that plethora of tight ends. The Broncos right now are really hurt offensively, and that'll trickle down to the defense as well. So we will start Tom Brady, probably a little bit outside of the top 15 quarterbacks, but again, similar to some other guys, I think 20 points is very realistic in terms of expectations for Brady. As far as the sits, Jeff Driscoll. Look, Drew Lock is not available. Jeff Driscoll is the next guy up, and he's also without Courtland Sutton. This is an absolute fade if I've seen one. Next up, we got the Packers at the Saints, starting both Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees. Aaron Rodgers, a much more comfortable start Now, we should monitor the situation with Davante Adams as we get closer. If he does sit, then the arrow is pointing a little bit more down for Aaron Rodgers, but we would still prefer him over Drew Brees because Drew Brees will for sure be without Michael Thomas, and we saw that Saints offense struggle versus the Raiders in that first outing without Thomas. But I think this will be a high-scoring affair. I think Drew Brees will bounce back here, and this Packers defense, it'll give up some opportunities. We've seen it versus the Lions. We've seen it the week before versus the Vikings. So I'm not all that worried. I think we just have to maybe adjust our expectations of Drew Brees while Michael Thomas is out. He's maybe a low-end quarterback too, but he's still worth a start here. And then finally, Chiefs at Ravens, the easiest start you could possibly imagine. You're starting both Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson, the number 1 and number 2 fantasy drafted quarterbacks respectively. This should be an extremely high scoring affair the way that I see it. There will be a lot of fantasy points to go around. Lamar Jackson probably has a little bit of a higher floor due to his rushing ability, but either way, both these guys have top 5 fantasy upside as far as the quarterback position is concerned in week 3. So with that, we wrap up this week 3 fantasy quarterback breakdown in terms of starts and sits. And as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree? Did you disagree? Along with your own personal start and sit questions, we will do our best to answer them. And in the meantime, if you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us as the week progresses. And check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Join the free newsletter, get exclusive content, become a VIP, and get personalized fantasy advice for the entire season from yours truly. All the details in the description. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.